yet it was being rehearsed. If there was time to practice, there was time to consult. And consulting with Congress is not just some high-minded principle, not some abstract thing, not a nice to have. It's a got to have.
Senator Chris Coons of Delaware is not defending Nicolas Maduro. He starts by saying the opposite. Maduro is a bad guy. American troops came home unharmed. But then Coons moves to the record. The operation cost an estimated 75 to 100 Venezuelan and Cuban lives. It was dangerous. It was high risk. And according to Coons, it was rehearsed for months while senior officials were telling Congress that military action to remove Maduro was not on the table. Coons had served alongside Rubio for 14 years. He knew Rubio had once demanded oversight from the other side of the dais, so his question is narrow. If the administration had time to practice the mission, why did it not have time to consult Congress? Watch how Rubio tries to explain the gap.
But the point here that I want to make first is that it was rehearsed for months. The administration had a number of contingencies it was trying to navigate through, but over the course of months, when the administration was taking strike after strike after strike against drug trafficking boats, in several instances where senior leaders of the administration briefed this committee and others, we were told that military action to remove Maduro was not on the table, that the campaign to try and deter drug trafficking was not going to include the exact military action that followed. Yet it was being rehearsed. If there was time to practice, there was time to consult. And consulting with Congress is not just some high-minded principle, not some abstract thing, not a nice to have. It's a got to have. And look, the chairman opened by saying that this was limited in scope and duration, that it was executed flawlessly, and we should all be happy about the result. That much I agree with. But our president continues to threaten Delcy Rodriguez and the remnant of the Maduro regime with military force if they don't comply. We should know. What are the policies? What is the path? What is the plan forward? You and I both know the long and painful history of wars that began and seemed to be resolved and then opened up into excruciating, expensive, years-long conflicts. In Iraq in particular, in Libya and elsewhere, things do not always go as planned. And so consultation with Congress that is truthful and forthcoming and transparent is critical. In your service in this body, you knew that, you experienced it. I was in the room as you held to account members of previous administrations for not coming forward as they should have. So, look, in order to avoid our men and women in our armed forces going into harm's way, doubting whether they have the support of the Congress, consultation, hearings, and deliberations are required. I understand the risk of leaks. That's a risk every administration takes. But at the end of the day, our framers entrusted the power of the declaration of war to this body, not to the executive. And where there is the time to consult, there has to be consultation. Second, I just wanted to talk about allies and alliances. I was just in Europe. I led a bipartisan delegation, as Senator Shaheen referenced, to Denmark. And our president's comments about NATO, about Denmark, and his attempts to coerce Denmark into giving up Greenland are appalling. They profoundly harmed our security. And I am asking you to do everything you can to reinforce our commitment to NATO. I was concerned that you just said NATO needs to be reimagined. Let's just be clear about the record. You know as well as I, Article 5 has only been invoked once, and it was in defense of us after we were attacked. Danes and soldiers from almost every other NATO ally deployed and served, fought and died. 52 days. And for me, the most emotional moment of my visit to Denmark was laying a wreath at the memorial to the Danes who served, fought, and died alongside Americans. So when our president says we never asked for anything from NATO, and they never gave us anything, and you suggest that they aren't carrying their weight, whether it's in bases, or in access, or in troops, or in service, it is allies that will keep us safe in the Indo-Pacific. Our treaty allies, Korea and Japan and Australia and the Philippines, are going to be critical to Indo-Pacific security against our principal threat, China, and in Europe. I'm worried that the very foundations of trust are being shaken. Our democracy depends on consultation with Congress that is truthful and timely, And the confidence of our allies depends on them knowing where we're going next. Today, an armada is steaming towards Iran. Our president is on social media threatening Iran. And I hope I can count on you, Mr. Secretary, to consult with us and inform us before our next actions, whether against Nigeria, Colombia, Cuba, Iran, or anywhere else. And I hope and believe that I can count on you to reinforce the sanctity of NATO, not to reimagine it, but to reinforce it.
Thank you. Well, let me unpack the 3 points you touched upon: consultation, NATO, Greenland, alliances in Greenland. Let me tell you on the consultation. Look, this has been a point of tension, not just in this administration and Congress, but in multiple administrations. As you rightly pointed out, I was a big fan of consultation when I was sitting over there. Now, it's a different job, different time. But that's not necessarily the point. This is a very unique situation that we faced here. The fact of the matter is that our mission, and the one you were briefed on and talked about, that mission remains ongoing, and that is the counter-narcotic mission that we continue to carry out as controversial as it may be. You may not all be fans of it, obviously, but it is happening in the Eastern Pacific, and it is also happening in the Caribbean Basin. The problem is, or the good news is, there aren't a lot of drug boats moving in the Caribbean Basin anymore, and that's what we had briefed Congress upon. This specific mission that you've talked about, one of the reasons why you rehearse it is to see if it's even feasible, to basically go to the president and say, is this something that's even an option on the table? The truth of the matter is that this mission could not have been briefed to Congress because it wasn't even in the realm of possible until very late in December, when all of our efforts to negotiate with Maduro had failed, and the president was finally presented these options and made these decisions. It was also a trigger-based operation. It may never have happened. It required a number of factors to all align at the right place at the right time in a very limited window, and it wasn't even clear if it was ever going to be possible. There's also the aspect which I do not control, and that is deference to the Department of War on operational security. Despite the fact that we had kept this quite constrained, the truth of the matter is that this was leaked. We now know it was leaked by a contractor at the Department of War that, had it been published, would have endangered the lives of people and/or would have probably canceled the ability to carry out the mission.
The contradiction in this clip is not complicated. Rubio's defense is that this was a unique, trigger-based operation, too sensitive and too uncertain to brief in advance. But Coons places a different record on the table. According to Coons, the mission was rehearsed for months. According to Coons, senior leaders briefed Congress during that same period and said military action to remove Maduro was not on the table. That is the conflict, not whether Maduro was dangerous. The contradiction is between preparation and disclosure. What Coons brings is a timeline, months of rehearsals, repeated briefings, a military action that, according to him, Congress was told would not happen, a reported death toll of 75 to 100 Venezuelans and Cubans, a constitutional split between Article II power and Article I war authority. He also brings history into the file, Iraq, Libya, and the permanent record of limited operations that became years-long conflicts. That is why consultation becomes a legal boundary, not a courtesy. Rubio's answer matters because it is not a denial of the rehearsal. He says rehearsals were part of determining feasibility. He says the option was not truly possible until very late in December. He says it was trigger-based. He says operational security limited what could be shared. And he points to a leak by a contractor at the Department of War that, according to his testimony, could have endangered lives or canceled the mission. But that answer does not close the file. There is no court order, no settlement, no stack of redactions in this exchange. The evidence is the sworn testimony and the timeline. The question was not whether every tactical detail should be broadcast. The question was whether Congress was told the truth about the direction of policy. There are classified rooms. There are restricted briefings. There is the Gang of Eight. Coons' final line matters because it narrows the excuse. The Gang of Eight has never leaked. If the problem was secrecy, the record already has mechanisms for secrecy. If the problem was accountability, secrecy becomes a shield. That is why this exchange reaches beyond Venezuela. It is about whether war powers can be stretched by calling a mission uncertain until the last moment. For a family with someone in uniform, this is not abstract. It determines whether their loved one is sent into danger with the backing of the elected branch. For taxpayers, it determines whether one operation becomes another open-ended commitment. For allies, it determines whether America's word is stable or dependent on a social media post. The record is now permanent. Coons made the allegation, Rubio gave the defense, and the gap between those answers is where oversight either survives or disappears.